Hello, I'm geferris, your narrator. In 2003, I took my kayak to Upernavik once again and paddled down to Kangersuatsiaq, Prøven, to visit an artist. This is a photograph of my Mark I long-haul kayak at the old harbor in launch. This kayak worked out to be an absolutely wonderful design. I enjoyed it greatly. It paddled very nicely and the rudder was exquisite. It was a specialized rudder really for sailing. I had the greatest time on my way down to Kangersuatsiaq. I've put in these two detailed 1 to 80,000 topographic views just so you can visualize some of the steepness of the terrain in this area. This is the foot of Sandersons Hope, and the rest of the mountain, 4,000 feet, is shrouded in cloud on this particular day. But it was wonderful to be able to capture this view out of the window. Here's the famous, very vertical passage on the north side of Sandersons Hope, and it was endless columnar basalt. On the opposite side is a very nice island, very pleasant to paddle by. This is across from the last picture, and it's on what's called Long Island. It was a very nice place to come in for a landing, just anywhere. And now we are coming into the backside of Upernavik. The airport is on top of the island, and we're going around to the east. We're getting views of the ice fjord out there. And from this view I can see how many icebergs are out there at this time. Next we have a more detailed view looking over toward Paddle. This is always the dramatic moment at the airport of looking out over the ice fjord. Here you can see it looks pretty rough, and it was. Upernavik had just had a fierce windstorm and they had big waves. Not too big to paddle in, but people were very concerned about the waves. Looking out from Gammelhavn, or Old Harbor, this is an iceberg on the horizon that is just blowing along. As is typical of Upernavik, they come out of the ice fjord and then travel southward down the coast. These were the clouds, and you can see the breaking waves in the picture. And I was able to estimate, because I know this area very well, that this was indeed the tail end of the windstorm that they had had. And I was just excited about trying my boat, this boat in the picture, in these wonderful waves, because I figured I'd get a free ride down to Kangersuatsiaq, which I did. This is how the same area looked. July 4th, 1993. And it's quite nice. It was such a bright, brilliant, sunny day when I took off from Gammelhavn. And this map shows my general paddling route, although actually I swung out more toward the islands. These were the views that my camera saw. The look of the waves and the sparkling light. I headed out more toward these islands, Madison and Prøven Islands, because I had so many times before paddled past the foot of Sandersons Hope, and I just wanted to do something different. I'm just getting at the end of Long Island, and I'm having a wonderful time getting a free ride off of these waves. Here it is on the map, just so you can see where I am. And I'm going to Paddle, which is at the base of Sandersons. I'm getting to the end, and this is a view from my kayak. I could truly trust this boat. It felt just great, even though conditions would normally be crazy in another kayak, I could take this picture. And this is my general route. Here's another picture just to show you. These are the minerals close up. It was quite amazing, the colors in these rocks, especially late in the afternoon. I happened to just come around this corner in 1993, my first time here, and all of these rocks were pink with some white stripes in them. I couldn't believe, I never forgot that moment. I started my crossing close in next to these rocks. Then I decided, well, I need to go over and paddle next to those islands. I'd already seen this view before, and I wanted a new view. So this map shows the general passage where I paddled between a couple of islands that I had never paddled between before. One island was Tina and the other one was Anana. And I looked at these islands passing in between them, which was really quite interesting because the waves were funneling between them and that amplified the waves. But I was looking for bird nesting sites. All along I had the wind pushing me very nicely, but what got to be kind of hilarious was when the islands were close together in the narrows, what would happen is the water would funnel in there and build up into some large breaking waves. I got to surf down one of them, and I really had to put my brakes on to keep myself from doing an ender. I had a very close call, setting myself up for just a grand ender. It would have been quite spectacular, and that's not a nice idea when you're out there all alone. Here on this map, if you look, you can see there are two islands that are quite close together, Kangersuatsiaq and Sandersons. And that was where the fetch had built up enough and the narrows were just enough that created a situation where I nearly went for an ender. I didn't try that trick again. I was glad I'd gotten away with so much, but that was really, truly a funnel situation. How I was able to slow my boat down was to rely on this Wenatchee water paddle and lean out on it with a very strong low brace and really use it to break the speed of the boat. Otherwise I would have flipped. The rudder on this boat is adjustable the same way that the Klepper rudder is adjustable, so I could leave it just enough in the water to control the direction of the boat without having it fully immersed. I always deploy my rudder just deep enough so that I have control over the bow or steerage. And if you look at this picture, you'll see some marks on it that are just remnants of seaweed left over, showing what levels it was at the last time I used it. I was completely comfortable in my new boat, and that's why I'm showing you this photograph of the seat. The cushion on the bottom allows you to put air in it, and the seat back is foam, so that you're absolutely comfortable once you get everything adjusted to your needs. I got down to an island called Sagdlik, and it looked very nice, so I pulled around the corner to look for a place to camp. And the problem I really had was I found a beautifully protected little cove that I could pull into and get out, and as I got up on top I realized it had very lush vegetation, meaning, as you can see in these pictures by these mounds of vegetation, that people had lived here. So that meant to me this would be a very favorable place for me to spend the night. I wrestled my boat up as high as I was able to get it. The tide had peaked out and now was starting to drop. And this is what it looked like. I took everything out of the boat that I would need. It was about 11:30 at night. I was very tired. And then I took out my tent and opened it up. It was my Chenard Megamid that I'd relied on for many years. And lo and behold, it turned out the blue and white portion was completely disintegrated, something I'd never even thought of might happen. And the only thing I was left with was the orange liner. So I got off my dry suit and pulled out my sleeping bag and ground pad and everything, and just curled up and went to sleep under all of that. It was a very mild evening, and I just passed out. I always carry a couple of 50-foot throw lines with me, so I tied it off. But what wound up happening in the wee hours of the morning was that the boat was precariously stranded between rocks. This was a nasty thing to do to a brand new boat. But one thing for sure, it's a very well built boat, and it survived completely unscathed. Thank you for watching my video. Tomorrow, the next section, I am to get up and paddle on down to a town I'd never been to, but just down the road from Upernavik, called Kangersuatsiaq or Prøven.